It is needed right now because we are suffering the terrible consequences for the industry. So yeah, we need land is crucial now, and land has to be cleared.
We have gone through a quite similar situation, especially when it comes to contamination with unexploded ordnances, including mines, submunitions, airdrop bombs, guided weapons.
You are watching India Today.
The MG ZS EV 2022, is it a mere facelift or is there a lot more to this vehicle? Well, we'll give you a tech geek's perspective. It's a lot more powerful, it's got more range, it looks a lot better, and well, it's a tech geek's dream. But is it truly a bang for your buck? Well, we're going to find out on this electric episode of Tech Today. Well, you look at the car and it looks a lot better. You see that the grille is essentially gone. It's an electric grille. This really grabs a lot of eyeballs on the streets. And of course, this is where the charging happens. So over here, you actually pop this open and voila, it begins to charge. You walk about, and then of course, there are several ways to charge this car. You can obviously go to one of the charging stations and put on a 25 kilowatt hour battery. Well, I don't know why this has to be put out there, plastered across, but yes, electric it is. And that's, well, no surprise. You walk around to the back of the car and you pop it open. And another way to charge the car is obviously this, right? This is what you can plug in to your wall socket, but this is going to take you maybe 18 hours to charge. So maybe it's not the best way to charge your EV. You can always go to a charging station. 50 kilowatt hours would be 0 to 80 maybe in an hour. If you actually go maybe to a 25 kilowatt hour station, then that one would take maybe, well, a couple of hours to charge. And I think those are good options. If you have the wall sockets at home that MG actually puts, that could take you around 8 to 9 hours. And then there's the MG van, which you can call out to, which I think is a really cool innovation. They'll actually come down and give you enough juice to get to the next charging station. So yes, when you're talking about range, well, the company claims this car can actually give you 461 kilometers on a single charge. Now, if that was the case, it would be ideal. But in the real world, I think that translates into a lot lesser. It also depends on how you drive. Are you really, well, flooring the gas pedal? Are you driving in eco mode? How much AC are you using? A lot of those things, right? So if you're driving maybe, well, in normal city conditions, let's put it this way, maybe you can get around 30 to 40 kilometers more than the previous MG ZS EV. And I think that's great, right? That means you can actually, well, maybe charge a few times lesser. And I think that is a great improvement. And that's exactly how EVs will be adopted a lot more as a technology as we see a lot more infrastructure coming in and as these guys keep getting better on the inside. Well, the minute you set foot in the car, strap your seatbelt on and press the brake and apparently switch it on. The thing is, you're not sure if it's on because it's an EV. You're greeted by the car in a minute. And the first thing that you lay your eyes on is one, this digital cluster, which is really cool. And then this massive touch screen where you can house all the controls of the car. But they've also given you these hard buttons over here. So you have the home screen, which you can click and then you get to the weather, the EV battery status. Then you also have the artificial intelligence taking over. For instance, you can just tell the assistant,
I'm listening.
to open sunroof. But then again, if this is not the ideal weather, the summer might not be the best weather, and then the monsoons to actually open the sunroof, you can just tell her, close sunroof. And then there's nearly 100 such connected features which make the car a lot of fun for all of us tech geeks. And largely, well, the car understands it. There's one little difference between the Aster and this one, which is that robot which is placed here on the dashboard in the Aster, which I was hoping would be there in this new version of the ZS EV. It's not there. Maybe it takes up too much power. Maybe it's unnecessary, but it was kind of cool and kind of creepy for some people who thought that the eye was always tracking them. But I was really hoping to be talking to that bot. 75 plus more, maybe 100 connected such features that you can actually make the car do. And that's why it's all about AI and internet inside. Though we'd love it if that wasn't mentioned on the outside of the car, but we're not nitpicking because the car on the inside looks fantastic. There's a lot of soft touch wherever you want to touch it. Some great use of carbon fiber, red stitching, very premium to feel, very premium to look at. You look out here at the gear system and it's fantastic, a very tactile rotating dial which makes it look very premium. And then these three buttons, of course, there's mode which has eco, then there's normal if you flick it up, and then you flick it further up is sport. Then there's curves, right? This button right here which has 3 levels, 1, 2, 3. It's tech geek paradise if I was to actually elaborate on what it means, but that's this car's kinetic energy recovery system, or how this car uses regenerative braking. And that is all out here on this digital cluster. You can actually find out what the voltage is like, what the current's like, how much power has been used, how much power is being regenerated on deceleration, what the motor speed is like. And I think that does a fantastic job. Also over here, you have, of course, what the average is like. Kitna deti hai can be answered in an EV. For example, it's saying around 5 kilometers per kilowatt hour because we're measuring things in kilowatt hour as soon as you're in an EV. More importantly, what I really like about this car, I'm going to put it in park whilst I tell you that, is how they've got these very small nifty features. For instance, there's this blind spot detection mode. So every time we're driving, you look at the blind spot detection, symbol out there, which essentially tells you don't change lanes or don't turn too fast to the left or to the right because a car is in your blind spot or a vehicle is there and you might meet with some sort of accident. And that is fantastic. It's really helpful in Mumbai traffic and all over India. I'm sure it's a similar story. So hats off to MG for actually coming up with very cool tech features which make your life a whole lot easier. When you get behind the wheel of this EV, that's when you realize that this is quite a delight to drive. It takes breakers well, it's got a very soft suspension. You sit in this commanding position where you feel like you're sitting in an SUV where maybe you're not, but everyone's looking at you anyways because it looks really interesting from the outside, especially with that electric grille. And of course, the charging port in the front, this red color really grabs eyeballs. And most importantly, when you're looking at all these modes, I know I showed you this eco, sport and normal, but frankly, if you're in normal, you're good to go for a city drive. You can save out on some range, you get a decent AC performance, all the features that really take power seem to work well. So if you're really driving this in the city, it's fantastic in normal mode. Eco is a little bit tough because when you actually get into eco mode, the car, throttles a little bit. Then of course, the AC isn't as effective. It's suddenly a little hotter in the cabin. Maybe on a winter night when the panoramic sunroof is completely, pulled back, then it might be a good option to be in eco and save some range. You save around 15 to 20 kilometers when you do that. You also save 15 to 20 kilometers the minute you switch off the AC. So yes, if you're in the summer using this, try not to use it in sport mode. Well, let's talk about charging because this is where the charging port's at. And a lot of people are unhappy with the placement, especially given how we drive in India. And maybe people prefer this to be a little closer to, a typical petrol or diesel car. But I kind of like it over here. It's moved away. It's not necessarily the MG symbol because clearly there's a camera down over there. But when you're actually charging is when you ask yourself the existential question, shall I buy an EV? Which we're going to come to you in a minute and actually ask that question. But if you want to buy an EV, this is an experience which you should be prepared for. I'll just put it this way. It comes down to a personality type at this point in 2022. If you want to buy an EV, you need to be patient, well organize and do your research and really, well, think on your feet, because we've gone to several charging stations in Mumbai which show up on the Tata Power app. Some of them don't seem to work. Some of them are at gas stations where attendants don't know anything about that. It's self-service. Most people don't know how to use them. There's no real explainer videos explaining how it really works. And there are timings which show on the app, but then clearly those chargers are not really complying with those timings. They're not really available during those timings. It's a hit and miss sort of a user experience, at least here in Mumbai. We've seen that on Tech Today, even in Delhi. So that needs to get better. But if you have, well, your preferred charging station, you're driving this in the city, and you know exactly what your route is like, what you're going to traverse on a daily basis, then the MG ZS EV is perhaps one of the best in a league of its own. Well, there you have it, the MG ZS EV 2022. Quite a delight to drive, and of course attracts all the eyeballs out on the road, especially this red color. It's been a lot of fun to actually drive this car. But this is out here on the streets of Mumbai, in fact on the outskirts of Mumbai. What do you guys think about EVs in New Delhi? Well, let's find out. And while you do, I'm going to put this into sport mode. Adios.
Definitely an electric vehicle. I think that's the future of cars.
EV.
I would like to purchase normal car.
Fuel vehicle. Definitely EV 100% all the time, because one, it's way more convenient. It's gonna save you a lot more money.
If immediately I have a requirement, I'll go for a fuel vehicle.
Why EV? Because that's something that I desire for, and it's also sustainable according to the environment.
EV will be the best car if you're going right now, seeing the prices going up for the petrol and diesel.
EVs will save you a lot of money, they'll save the environment, and they're better in general, overall. They're quieter, less pollution, less noise pollution.
Yeah, Tata Nexon, yes. And I think they're doing very well for themselves.
If I can wait for 3 years, 4 years or something, then maybe an EV. Because right now there's not enough infrastructure in India to support an EV.
Petrol cars are not really preferable anymore. EVs are just generally a lot better for the environment and for society in general.
I guess an EV is better because, you know, in today's time when the pollution is on the rise, we have to be sensible citizens of this world. And as the youth of today, we have to take forward good methods for the environment as well.
Once I step out, if I want to step out for longer, if I want to drive for a few 100 kilometers, I'm worried. Where will I charge my car? What if the battery runs out?
Clearly, young India is all set for the EV revolution, and I'm kind of getting used to this as well. Stopping at a charging station, first checking the app. You have to be very patient, plan it out well, and do your research, and make a lot of friends along the way. When a Tata Nexon or a Kona shows up here at the station, you end up making a lot of friends as well. But if you want to make friends, there's another career you can consider, and it's all set for a tech revolution as well. That is gaming. If you're all set to join us on the gaming revolution on the other half of the show, well then stay tuned, or shall I say, game on.
Can you imagine the Earth without the moon? Well, this isn't some sci-fi plot. The United States had once planned on nuking the moon. As bizarre as this may sound, documents have now surfaced from the United States Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, also known as AATIP, that reveals the United States had plans to test advanced technology on the moon. It might sound outwardly, but the plans included invisibility cloaks, anti-gravity devices, traversable wormholes, and even tunneling the moon using nuclear explosion. The documents that run to 1,600 pages reveal some of the stranger priorities of AATIP, a secretive Department of Defense program that ran from 2007 to 2012. The AATIP wasn't known to public until 2017, when the program's former director resigned from the Pentagon. The agency was at the center of global controversy thanks to several videos of an unidentified aircraft moving in seemingly impossible ways released by the former director. And the latest revelation is indeed set to raise questions as the United States government and NASA push for a return to the lunar surface nearly half a century after the Apollo mission was shut. The new tranche of documents is now under investigation and more is expected to be revealed in the coming days.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You.
Welcome back to Tech Today, guys. I'm your host, Aayush Ailawadi. I hope you're charged up because we are recharged and the EVs as well, as you can see. And we are one of India's top gaming startups to meet the innovator of the day. Who is the innovator of the day? Well, let's find out. On Tech Today, we like to focus on the innovators, and I have with me a true innovator in the gaming space, Vikram, co-founder of Games 24/7. Vikram, what a pleasure to have you with us on Tech Today.
Thank you for having me.
When we're talking about Make in India for the rest of the world, it should be conducive to Make in India. But the gaming space has a little bit of a shadow looming on top for the past few years, and regionally as well. We've seen what's happened in Karnataka when it comes to particular regulations and legislation. How do you, as Games 24/7, look at the regulatory climate?
So, on the one hand, India has the most enviable history of jurisprudence when it comes to gaming. We have Supreme Court judgments going back all the way to the 1950s, which draw out clear distinction between games of skill and games of chance. One being called, that is games of chance being called gambling, the other actually being entitled constitutional rights under Article 19(1)(g). So the jurisprudence is very strong, very clear. Then you have, Rummy being ruled as a game of skill by the Supreme Court recently, fantasy being ruled to be a game of skill by the Supreme Court. But then you do have, when it comes to state level policy making, I would say the best way to describe it is some sort of confusion, and also a lack of recognition, I think, in some sense of how huge the space can be. Today, we are a $2 billion market. By any meaningful estimate, we're talking $25 to $30 billion by 2030. Today, the industry employs about 50,000 people. That could well be 1 million people by 2030. And I think that's the point we're trying to make to both central and state governments that, this, from a judicial legal perspective, we are legal, but we need that clarity from the government. And I think the best starting point is the central government itself. I think we're off to a great start with the creation of the AVGC task force. Thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister for that. But I think as I said, you rightly pointed out, great potential and the ability to turn India, into a global gaming hub. But it's certainly going to require both the central government and the state governments to provide some clarity, both to entrepreneurs and to investors.
Yeah, someone who's been a student of the law and then a self-confessed tech geek. When I have these conversations with some of you all in the gaming space, it's oddly reminiscent how we were chatting about crypto and blockchain and some of the similar issues, right? Spreading awareness, educating people about it, genuinely getting down and deconstructing it and explaining to policymakers how that tech works and then what the potential is once it's monetized. I feel like it's a similar bucket or a similar set of challenges that both these sectors face.
It's anything new, right? I think the Ubers and the Olas of the world have been through that. They have had plenty of speed bumps along the way. The Flipkarts and the Amazons of the world have been through that. And I think it's generally the nature of new industries. This is the trajectory for gaming, in particular real money gaming in the West, is not very different. It's generally been bumpy, but I think eventually regulators in the West have come around to recognize that the best way to go, particularly when all of this is available online, is regulating, not banning. One of the one of the really poor outcomes I think that occurred with some of the bans that were put in place in the southern states, most of which have now been reversed by the high courts of those states, was that you had proliferation in illegal gambling, and a lot of it which comes from outside India. So it's lost employment, lost revenues, lost ability to compete in global markets. And so I think the reasons are numerous for the governments, both the central and the state governments, to come forward and work with us in regulating the space. And this is a very unusual situation where we're actually going to the government and saying, we want you to regulate us, we want you to streamline things, we want you to provide clarity, and we're willing to have our hands tied a little bit, because that's going to help the industry, it's going to help the consumer, it's going to help the government.
Interesting, Vikram. Thanks so much for joining us on Tech Today. You're on a segment called The Innovators, and we're going to actually end this by saying, well, thank you so much. Let's hope that this sector grows and the tech geeks and gamers enjoy it even more. I think it's a fascinating space to be. You keep innovating and game on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aayush.
Elon Musk, Twitter, Elon Musk, will he, won't he? There's been too much of flip-flop and confusion on this particular topic. So Tech Today thought that tech geeks are the best placed to actually answer a few questions about this. Here's a special report.
Story goes like this. Elon Musk, who has a major following on Twitter, was not too happy with the way Twitter was policing its users with, free speech being impacted. That's what he felt. So what he decides to do is buy Twitter. And that's what he's done. He's bought Twitter for $44 billion. But the bigger question now is this: what will Elon Musk's version of Twitter be like? So the deal is expected to be completed by the end of 2022. Twitter, which is essentially a publicly listed company, will now be a completely privately owned company owned by, of course, Elon Musk. As far as Musk's plan is concerned, he wants to turn Twitter into a platform where everyone can debate and say things without risking censorship or blocking. Although previously he did qualify that by free speech he meant everything that was legal. Because in the past, this concept of free speech has actually enabled people to spread misinformation, false news, fake news, abuse, and a lot of hatred as well. Now, it is a well-known fact that Twitter as a platform has millions of bot accounts. And bot accounts doesn't mean purchased accounts. Bot basically means B-O-T, bot accounts, which are essentially fake accounts. Elon Musk has suggested that using his advanced AI techniques, he'll be able to identify these bot accounts and rid Twitter of this whole concept of fake accounts. The challenge, however, would be to differentiate between real bots and Twitter users who act like bots. Under Elon Musk's reign, almost all users on Twitter will be able to get that blue tick, which each one really craves for. And the reason is that apart from identifying these bot accounts, Elon Musk plans to give that blue tick to every human user on Twitter. Elon Musk also wants to focus a lot on transparency with Twitter users. Basically, he wants to explain to people how Twitter differentiates and how Twitter spreads content to its users. Why some tweets will be able to reach out to a lot of people and then the reach of some tweets is much lesser. What are the factors which determine the visibility of different content on Twitter? He wants those codes to be out there for everyone to see. Now, another very big question is, what is the future of Parag Agrawal? He took over as Twitter CEO after Jack Dorsey, who founded Twitter. With Elon Musk in the driver's seat, will Parag Agrawal continue to be the CEO of Twitter? Elon Musk really hasn't been too happy with the management of Twitter and the way it is being handled. There is no confirmed news regarding whether he's going to fire Parag Agrawal or not, but just in case there is a shuffling in the Twitter management and Parag Agrawal is fired by Elon Musk will have to shell out a hefty $42 million for Parag Agrawal if he is fired within 12 months of a change in the management of the microblogging site. Twitter has not commented on any of this yet.
Of course, we've suffered from range anxiety throughout the shooting of this episode, so please don't try this at home or try this at home at your own risk. But we have enjoyed traveling, shooting our show, and bringing this and packaging it all to you in an EV on a single charge? Well, maybe we got a few top-ups on the way, but you'll never know. Maybe you'll know if you actually write into us and follow us on our social media handles. If you enjoyed the show or you haven't, please do write to us on our social media handles. Until next week, adios.
Vladimir Ashkenazy, a great pianist, Vladimir Mayakovsky,